Today's guest is Dr. Richard, and we talk about contribution and how giving back leads to happiness in life. Dr. Richard models this in how he operates. Listen in and find out more. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's theme is time. You ever notice that 60 seconds in front of the microwave is not like 60 seconds on Facebook? I never seem to get drawn into staring at the microwave for any longer than needed. And I'm usually impatient at how long 60 seconds takes to go by. It's not hard, on the other hand, to get lost on the internet and lose quite a bit of time. This past month, my life seems to be following the theme of time and focus. I just finished reading The One Thing by Gary Keller and would like to share a quote. Imagine life is a game in which you are juggling 5 balls. The balls are called work, family, health, friends, and integrity. And you're keeping all of them in the air. But one day, you finally come to understand that work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it will bounce back. The other 4 balls, family, health, friends, and integrity, are all made of glass. If you drop one of these, it will be irrevocably scuffed, nicked, perhaps even shattered. You know, too often we don't realize this lesson until it's too late. We spend too much time on work and not enough in the other areas. We create small cuts, and disappointments break our relationships with our spouse, our children, and family members. And we focus on work and put everything else aside. And yet, work is the one that suffers the least when we don't pay attention to it. Sure, we could lose our job, but that usually takes some pretty big issues, and at the end of the day, you can always find something else to do. It's hard to get your health back, mend relationships, and we can't recover lost time. When it comes to time focus, the best thing is to focus on time blocks and put them in your calendar, and then focus on one thing during that period. Remove the distractions that eat up our time, and I know I really struggle with this, so I schedule my tasks, I handle the most important tasks first, and remember that a task might be your family, relationships, and your own needs, because after all, if you don't take care of you, you can't help others. In today's show, we're going to explore this in depth. I'm working on trying to focus on one thing and turn off the distractions. What about you? Do you have enough time to do everything you want to? I recently met our guest, Dr. Richard, at Podcast Movement this past month, and we really hit it off. We have very much the same driving forces of having meaning in our lives and giving back. Dr. Richard Schuster is a licensed clinical psychologist and host of the rapidly growing podcast, The Daily Helping. Food for the brain, knowledge from the experts, tools to win at life. He helps listeners become the best version of themselves. He hosts well-known guests who have followed their passion and have the shared vision of making the world a better place. His show's movement is to get 1 million people each day to commit acts of kindness for others and post it on their social media using the hashtag #MyDailyHelping. I've had the honor of being on his show, and it should be available shortly. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Dr. Richard. It's great to have you join us today.
Very happy to be here. Thanks so much.
And thank you for joining us. So let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
It's an interesting question. I was very lucky to grow up in a household where my father was self-employed as a dentist, and my mom, though she previously was a school teacher, once she had kids, mom stayed at home. When I was very young, I didn't understand a lot. I mean, we had some nice things and we took some vacations. It was really as I started to get a little bit older that I was starting to learn money lessons, particularly from my father. My dad would sometimes take me to work with him, and it was pretty cool, to be a kid and watch your dad do these dental procedures when he used to practice. And one of the things that I learned early on that he taught me was that sometimes he would give cases away. And there would be families that couldn't afford to have fillings for their kids or things like that, and he would do them below his cost, giving that away. So that was one of really the first lessons I learned, is that you can have nice things, but you should be giving back.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of pleasure and self-reward that comes from giving back. And I know we're going to dig into that later into the episode. So for your kids, are you doing anything different to teach them about money?
My 3-year-old is kind of in the zone where he doesn't really understand money. My 5-year-old is starting to. So he has a piggy bank and he's very proud of it and excited to put money in and save for things. And we're slowly introducing him to these concepts of what it's like to earn things. And I guess I should have said this when you were asking me the family question, is that even though I grew up with privilege, my parents always made me have a job. So since the age of 13, I worked. I always worked. And so we're starting to instill that in our kids in very gentle ways. With a 5-year-old, he's not mowing the lawn. He's making his bed and keeping his room straight and things like that. But yes, I do believe that it's important to talk to your kids about money and let them understand that money is just a vehicle. And it's really how we act and what we apply it towards that's important, and how we handle ourselves in abundance of it or in the absence of it.
That's very true. Now, I know you have an interesting backstory that I'd like you to share, because I think even I was on this type of a thing. There is so much consumerism in this country, and we all get on this treadmill of what is important. And it's buying the fancy cars, living the big lifestyle, and we think that's going to bring us happiness. And I'd love for you to just kind of share your story of how you feel about that and then what kind of happened to you.
So it's funny because what I'm about to share is very incongruent with what I said a few minutes ago regarding, the lessons from my father. And when I was younger, even through college, that all kind of held true for me. And something happened when I got into the quote unquote real world. And I don't know if it was just a societal expectation or I got my first taste of having a paycheck or what it was that was kind of like a real job. But my focus shifted towards very much the material. I was extremely focused on things for the purposes of having things. And I often liken who I was in my early 20s to that character that Nicolas Cage played that movie Family Man, except I didn't have his level of success, but I wanted to. I wanted the fast cars and I wanted the Rolexes and never wanted a family, only wanted to amass money and boats and things like that. And so despite the lessons my parents had taught me, those lessons went by the wayside for a number of years. And I began achieving financial success However, something happened along the way, and that I broke my spine in a car accident in which I was nearly killed. And so what's interesting is that from the standpoint of what happens to people in near-death experiences, there's been some very interesting research on this. One of the guys who's kind of the leader in this area, near-death experiences, is a neuroscientist out west named David Eagleman. And what's interesting, and we know this from records of soldiers dating back really 100 plus years, is that when people are about to die, not all people, but some people experience a radical slowing down of time. So I'm going to drop another movie reference on you, Rocky. If you think about The Matrix and that scene where Neo, for the first time, is kind of moving and everything's in slow motion and bullets are just slowly moving by him, that's what a lot of people experience when they perceive that they're about to die. So for me, in that moment, that's what happened to me. From the time that the car went through the intersection, slammed into me as I was turning left, my airbag deployed, I was sent careening into oncoming traffic, and then ultimately hit a telephone pole, which stopped my momentum. Maybe 3 seconds, maybe. The reality is, in that period of time, it felt like much, much longer to me. Like I remember so vividly seeing these little shards of glass as my windshield shattered, floating through the air, and the center console being crushed into my side, kind of like a Coke can that somebody had squeezed in their hand. And my first thought was, I'm about to die. And it wasn't one of these like Ghost of Christmas Future kind of deals where I was like, dear God, if you let me live, I promise to be a nice human being. I was dead. I knew I was dead. And so after that thought, the next thought I had was, my mom is going to get a call from the police saying that I'm dead. And that filled me with incredible guilt. The immediate thought after that was, here I am reflecting, I'm about to die, and what have I done? Like, what have I accomplished? Where in my life have I really done something spectacular? And the answer was, I hadn't. I had a pretty nice car, like that was cool. But what have I really done? What legacy have I left? And so that was kind of the last thought before things responded to normal speed, if you will. And so that really was this catalyst for me to start thinking about, what can I do differently? And I did go back to work. I was in the process of building an IT company. I used to refer to it as an empire. Like I was building an empire. That's what I would tell people, how obnoxious and how arrogant. And I went back to it mostly out of fear of letting people down. A lot of people were counting on me, my parents included, that I was talking about this. I mean, we do know, of course, like if you want to accomplish a goal, what's the best way to accomplish that goal, right? You tell everybody so that there's accountability. But when I went back to this job, I found nothing was really the same for me, Rocky. Everything was kind of like this life had been sucked out of it. And I stuck it out longer than I should have, but I was miserable until finally I just walked away. I walked away and I went from that 70 to 80 hour work week feeling perpetually miserable to zero. And I didn't know what I was going to do with my time. I had no idea what my future was going to entail. I was terrified, but knew that I had to make that step because it was affecting my psychological health and it was affecting my physical health. I actually went to go see an infectious disease specialist because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Well, I was miserable. That's what was wrong with me. And so sitting around pondering what to do, feeling like, great, I walked away from this miserable thing, but I've wasted the last 3 years of my life. Technology is not really something that I'm going to be able to apply moving forward or that I think I want to. And a funny thing happened is that one day I wound up at a grocery store and I heard a couple of women talking and usually butt into people's conversations, but they were talking about social media and their teenage daughters that were going on this thing called MySpace.com. And so for those listening that don't recall MySpace or are a little bit younger in your tribe, back in the day, before there was Facebook, there was MySpace. And actually Facebook at the time was in its infancy, was only available to college students, not everybody. So I kind of interjected because I had this background in technology and security, and I gave them a couple of tips. And they said to me, well, would you come share that with our PTA? And I said, absolutely. So I'm now speaking to this school about internet safety. And now all of a sudden that belief I had that this 3 years I spent in technology was wasted was eradicated, because I found a way to leverage that knowledge and skill set I had in the technological arena into something that was more in line with what I wanted to do, something that helped others. And as it happened, there was a police officer sitting in the audience who was on the city cybercrime unit who had a kid at the school. Don't know why that guy wasn't asked to give this talk, but he liked it and asked me to partner up with them. And so now all of a sudden I'm on a speaking tour, talking to people about internet safety and feeling this sense of fulfillment that was really, really cool, that was missing for me. And then that led to being asked to mentor at-risk kids, which I liked. I took that on and decided that I needed to pursue postgraduate work in helping others. So I obtained a master's in social work. That was so rewarding for me. I worked with Hurricane Katrina victims during my training there, and then ultimately continued on my education and obtained a doctorate in clinical psychology, where I then obtained advanced training in forensic and neuropsychology. So it's interesting that conversation in the grocery store is really kind of what sparked this for me, but put me on a path of helping others.
And so there's a lot that I want to dig into here. And the first comment is kind of where you ended up, is one small thing. The fact that you even took the step to speak to those women set you down a whole different path in life. And I think people are expecting these big changes. And yet it wasn't a big change. It was one small little encounter that kind of changed everything. The question I have for you, though, is not everyone is in a life-changing accident. And I've had a lot of guests who have been in those types of situations. What do the rest of us do? Like, as you mentioned, the misery of your life causes health issues. You're sitting here and you're not thrilled. How do we help people, or what can people do who don't have a life-altering event that shocks them into change? And it doesn't even sound like that one shock sent you to change. It sent you more to misery, and you spent all these years kind of struggling through it. So what do the rest of us do?
So one of the things that I try and encourage people to do, and it's the focus of my show's platform, is we have to focus first on finding what makes us passionate. What is it? For me, the winning triumvirate here is you find something you're passionate about. That thing which you're passionate about can help make the world a better place. And then if you're able to leverage that and do something that can provide for you financially, that's the winning combination. Because if you can do that, your days will never feel like work. You will be fulfilled in everything you do. All of the health benefits of feeling happy and fulfilled kind of flow from there. So I think the first thing you have to really do is, if you feel like you're just kind of going through the motions, getting up the last possible second, when your alarm goes off, and listening to the radio when you're driving into work, and you go through the motions for 8 to 9 hours a day, and you're just living for the weekend, you need to really stop and ask yourself, what is it that inspires me? What is it that makes me happy? And you have to start there, because if you don't know that, it's really difficult to roadmap the rest of your success.
And I know this isn't always easy to do. This morning I was having that conversation with my son. I'm like, what do you want to learn and what do you want to work on? And he's like, I want to work on something exciting. I'm like, well, what's exciting to you? And he couldn't tell me what was. He could tell me all the things that weren't exciting. And I think this is where a lot of us struggle, is we might think something is exciting, and then we try it and we find out it's not all that exciting. And I know right now a lot of people are like, follow your passion. And then there's another half of the group that's saying that's bad advice because your passion may not pay you. And I know you talked about bringing the two together if you can. And even if you can't, you can still work and follow a passion on the side that doesn't bring you income. But is there a process, or is there a system people can go through to start to help them zone in on what that is for themselves? Because I think too often we look at other people and we say, what should I do?
I think that's a fair question, Rocky. And I'll take it back to your son, the discussion with your kid. Tell me how old your son is.
He's 16.
Okay. So a 16-year-old brain has already been essentially influenced in a lot of ways by what society is telling him to think, right? If you were to go back in a time machine and you had your kid at the age of 5, and you said to your 5-year-old son, talk to me about the things that you're excited about and the things that make you happy, I think that probably becomes an easier discussion for him. And it becomes an easier discussion for most people, because when we start talking about things that we could potentially do professionally, we start disqualifying them based on what we perceive to be practical, what we perceive to be financial. Like, what if somebody is an attorney, but they really love painting, but their lifestyle dictates that they have a mortgage for a certain size house and private school tuition for their kids, or whatever the case may be. But I think that the point is, Rocky, I think that we allow the societal expectations that we have internalized in many ways to disqualify us before we even try them to explore what it is that makes us really happy. So an exercise that is helpful is to pretend you're in an environment, kind of take yourself into this magical place where money is of no issue. That you have all of your needs met in every imaginable way. And now, with that frame of mind, start thinking about what are those things that I love to do. And that kind of helps start peeling those layers of the onion back a little bit, right? Because when you remove the constraints of what we believe we can't do, then we start thinking about what we do find passion in, what really gets us excited. And that's where I would start.
He'd spend his day playing Forefront.
And you can't make a living doing that. I think there are people that play video games professionally, so I don't want to shoot that down. But you get the point, is that even at the age of 16, that's somebody who's old enough to know what society says is a good job, is a bad job, is the kind of career that one should be proud of, and the kind of career that one would frown upon, right?
Absolutely. And you are correct, because esports seems to be this up and coming thing where kids are making six figures playing video games. But I struggle with this because I look at this and I go, where is the meaning in that? Now, I understand the kid who's playing it might be having fun, but the rest of us are watching. And that doesn't seem to be very meaningful to enjoying life. But that's just my opinion.
I guess my response to that would be, and we probably shouldn't go on this video game tangent too long, but my response to that would be is that I very much love watching football and baseball. I love it. And I don't play football and baseball, but a 16-year-old has grown up with a joystick in his hand, right? Like the controller has been kind of a third appendage for many kids that age. So probably watching that for people in your son's peer group are like people in our peer group who want to sit back and watch a ball game on a weekend.
That's very true. So what do you think prevented you from moving quicker after the accident? Because it sounds like it took you a few years to actually make that change or to find that opportunity.
Fear. It was for sure fear. I was so afraid for two reasons. One, I had no idea what in the world I was going to do with my life. I was so sure when I started that company that this was it for me. I had found the thing that was going to allow me to amass limitless wealth and prestige and all of this awesomeness that I felt like I deserved wrongly. And if I didn't have that, what would I do? And then on top of that, I had so many people that had told me they're so proud of me. Oh, everybody, we're so proud of you. You've done this. And I didn't want to have that phone call with people that loved and cared about me to say, this is a failure for me. I don't like the work. I'm miserable and I'm walking away. And now I realize in hindsight with time and experience that it was far more courageous of me to walk away than it was to stay in a situation I hated. But I was really afraid of letting people down, and that slowed me tremendously.
And I think there are a lot of people in that same situation. Fear seems to be one of the things that tremendously holds us back. And that's one of the things that I have learned. And you're the expert in this area, so I'll kind of prompt you with the question and maybe you can explain it in the sense that our brains are designed to protect us. And so in order to protect us, it's got to essentially create fear to keep us safe. And they're not designed to make us do great things, I think. I don't know if that comes from somewhere else in the body. I've heard different people say different things about where that comes, that giving back and that ability to do that. What insights can you share in that area?
In terms of fear versus giving back, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly, Rocky.
More so, I think the question is more our brain and fear and how it prevents us from greatness by holding us back because our brain wants us to be safe.
So the fight or flight system that's in our brain, sympathetic versus parasympathetic, like we've researched this forever. And our brains are essentially evolved from a survival instinct. So you were right when you said our brains are designed to protect us. But these mechanisms in our brain are ancient. These ancient mammalian systems that have been around forever weren't really designed to think about self-actualization and, steal a little Monty Python, the meaning of life, right? They were basically designed to keep saber-toothed tigers from eating us. That's what our brains were designed to do. And so it's interesting as society has evolved how we handle fear. And a lot of times what ends up happening is there's a kind of thing that can happen, like if somebody is holding a gun to your head in 2018, that's kind of like the saber-toothed tiger in your face, right? The fear of rejection, the fear of lack of fulfillment, or in my case, letting people down, that's really something that we have created in our minds. And yet it still fires up that flight or fight system. But at the end of the day, those fears are more imagined than real threats to existence. Yet this is what happens to a lot of people, and where you start seeing even people that don't experience trauma, that haven't been in a near-death experience or haven't had their life threatened or seen a loved one's life threatened. Over time, what happens is when you're under constant stress or constant fear, you essentially are having some of the same symptoms as people that have been exposed to the trauma. So at the end of the day, it can still be extraordinarily problematic for one's well-being, physiologically and psychologically.
That's very true. And I think that's where people get stuck, is that we have, for lack of a better word, irrational fears, because these things are not going to hurt us, and yet we feel they do, and they prevent us from taking that next step.
And it's going to be very interesting to continue following this kind of research, because what also didn't exist in the age of cavemen was social media. And so what you're seeing, what the research is starting to indicate, at least from a behavioral standpoint, is that people are increasingly promoting facades of success and acting because they think they have to, based on the social media expectations of others, which is creating, you talk about confirmation bias on steroids, right? But it's creating this feedback loop for us. And so while there are all kinds of positive things that can come from social media, there's also a lot of bad things if you're not really in alignment with who you are and what your purpose is and all of these things. Because so many times there are those people, right, the Facebook complainers who are constantly posting about every rain cloud that's following them around and every bad thing in their life. But the vast majority of people, and the research tends to suggest this, is that people tend to promote an idealized version of reality on Facebook. And so when you're getting online and you're seeing your neighbor posting these amazing pictures day after day after day about how great their life is, and look at this amazing restaurant I ate at, and look at my wonderful car and my vacations and all of these things, and there's nothing wrong with those things. But when that's what's being promoted, there is an inherent sense that we then have to do the same thing. And I might have hijacked the topic and gone a little astray, so I apologize for that. But I think it's important to talk about that, because this is something that we don't even really think about in our day-to-day lives. This is just checking Facebook is as automatic for us now as using the restroom, right? It's just something we do, but we often don't think about what are the ramifications of that.
That's true. And I think a lot of people don't realize, I mean, the purpose of Facebook is marketing. They are marketing, and you're the one that they are marketing to. And as you said, the world has evolved and our brain hasn't kept up with that evolution. So how do we do that? Knowing all these things, what can we do to kind of get out of that loop, overcome the fear, and just start to take action in a way that's more beneficial to us? So in light of this and the fact that we are being bombarded with all these things and we have these fears that are preventing us from living the life we want, what is it that we can do? How do we take action to overcome ourselves and live the life we really want to live?
One of the things the brain really likes is that you confirm something as having happened. Now, there is a lot of research into visualization, and that they've done studies that if you think about something as if it's happened, even if it hasn't, the brain will respond to that positively. And that's certainly interesting. So I think for those who are trying to do something very new that they've dared about, try visualizing it. In fact, this is something that is a part of exposure therapy. If somebody's trying to overcome a fear like fear of snakes, right? Like part of it is you gradually work towards visualizing yourself in the presence of a snake. And then eventually they put you in the presence of a snake, or fear of flying. They're starting to do cool stuff like that with virtual reality. So one of the things that somebody can do, it's interesting, there's been some research that, the brain responds to something, whether you actually experience it or you visualize it. So there was a study that I recall, and I don't remember what year this was conducted, but they basically had two basketball teams, and one visualized, just perfectly drilling their free throws before they did them, and the other group didn't. And the team that spent the time visualizing this consistently had a higher free throw percentage rate than the ones that didn't. And it wasn't like one team just had exceptional basketball players. They were all, relatively speaking, in equivalency in terms of their skill sets. So visualization is a very powerful tool that anybody can use. And you can start really small. In visualization, it's interesting. And this is something that we utilize from treating people with phobias, is that when you do something called exposure therapy, you start working people towards the eventual goal. Like if somebody's afraid of snakes, you start working towards the eventual goal of them actually handling a snake. But along the way, you focus on visualizing yourself in the presence of a snake. First, maybe within 100 yards of a snake, or looking at a picture of a snake, and then you visualize being closer to the snake. And so back to the discussion on fear, Rocky, it's interesting, just thinking about snakes for people with that phobia would create that physiological response, that panic response. And so it's the same thing with anything. If you are visualizing positive things, if you are visualizing that success, I went back to the analogy of the lawyer who wants to paint. What if that lawyer who is lacking fulfillment in his life visualizes himself taking a class at a community center once a week, really enjoying the painting, what that would feel like, making new friends who have a common goal of painting? All of a sudden, that's going to fire a whole different set of things in his brain. And now your brain is starting to think about different possibilities that it previously didn't think were possible. And it can be small victories. That doesn't mean that if you don't like your job, some people say burn the sails, and there's different schools in that, right? Like burn the ships.
There is.
But if you have a wife and kids or something like that, burning the ships might also mean burning your marriage. So, you can't always recommend that. But yet, if you start finding those things that bring you fulfillment, all of a sudden you're open to new possibilities, and you might find that you're happier in that day job as well. So that doesn't mean that the lawyer has to stop being a lawyer. Maybe he finds that he just needed that extra outlet, and maybe he starts organizing painting expos for a charity or something on weekends. You just never know. But you have to have the courage to take that first step, and that first step might be imagining it. The other thing that I would say, and this is going to run contrary to what most people want to do, is see what happens when you take a social media sabbatical. And what will happen is the first day, you're going to be like somebody quitting smoking. Like it's really going to be uncomfortable. And there's a reason for that. You said it yourself, that Facebook is designed to market to us, right? To make disgusting amounts of money. The thing about Facebook is every time somebody likes our posts, we get a little hit of dopamine. Just a little hit, and it feels good. And so I'm certainly not stating that if you are on Facebook and you like somebody appreciating your post, that means you have an addiction. I'm not saying that at all. But in terms of the mechanisms of addiction, the principles are kind of there. And so people who find themselves addicted to social media, it's kind of the same thing as getting addicted to porn or addicted to barbiturates or whatever substance you want to throw out there. So I encourage people to just put it away. Put it away and see what happens after a week. And certainly shut it off. If you have a family, shut it off during mealtime. It's astounding to go to restaurants and see how many people are on their phones. So unplugging from social media, not forever, because that's not always realistic. And there are a lot of good things that we get from social media, like pictures of nieces and nephews and things of that nature. But unplugging now and again is good for us. It's like a reset, and that also can help us refocus. I think that we in 2018 are too distracted and we're pulled in too many different directions, not just by phone notifications, but by all these things in our lives. And the great promise that was said to us was that technology was going to level the playing field, and we were going to have the Jetsons-like utopia where robots did everything for us and work was a breeze, and we would have all this extra meaningful time to pursue interests. And the research shows it's been the opposite, Rocky. It's that we have less time, or we perceive that we have less time than ever before, and we're working more. So unplugging is a nice step to recharge ourselves.
I totally agree. We've unplugged mostly from TV. So we don't watch TV except for an occasional movie, which we're intentional with. We're going to pick this movie and watch it, not just whatever happens to be on at the moment. Social media, kind of half and half for myself. And part of it is because of all of the stuff with regards to the business side of what I do.
Of course.
And that's kind of where I try and spend most of my social media time, is connecting with people who are going to push me forward and pull me up versus just worried about people taking pictures of whatever they're doing in their life. And I think one of the things that people struggle with is, and you were good about not saying this, is between A and Z are 26 different choices, and too often everyone looks at a choice as yes or no, but it doesn't have to be. It's not like, hey, you can't do social media. It's, why don't you schedule 20 minutes of social media, go have your 20 minutes, get your hit of dopamine, and then shut it off and go spend your time doing something else that is probably more important to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that we increasingly in a society have become more dogmatic in our thinking. This was something that was certainly evidenced in the last election cycle, and I'm not getting political, but what everyone would certainly agree on is whatever side of the political spectrum one tends to identify with, the viciousness in the last election cycle was astounding, something that I had never seen. And what was very interesting is that I would consistently see people saying that, oh, you voted for this candidate, I'm unfriending you, and vice versa. And so I do think you're exactly right. These are not yes or no, A or B kind of decisions necessarily. And yet that's certainly the direction it seems that we're moving in societally, where there isn't enough gray anymore, because I don't think that we have discussions anymore. I think we have polarized sides of position, polarized positions and perspectives, and dialogue is disappearing. So I appreciate, Rocky, that you said that it's not an all or nothing thing and that there can be a happy medium.
Very, very true. So I want to shift gears a little and kind of get back to your mission and what you're doing going forward. And specifically, I think a lot of us, myself included, and it sounded like you were this, we're looking for significance. And when I talk about significance, it's that fame, that fancy car, that big house. This is how we know we've lived the American dream and succeeded. But what I've kind of learned, and I think you do a lot of this, is to shift that to contribution. What am I doing to give back, and how am I helping others? And I think one of the places people struggle with this is, I think they feel like they have to have a goal to change the world. And I don't think it has to be that big. I think you can make small changes and do it on a daily basis. And you've kind of started an organization, if that's the right word for it, called the Daily Helping. Can you share a little bit about what that is and what your goals are with that?
Sure can. So the Daily Helping is my podcast where I host people who do have that common goal, experts, thought leaders, and influencers who want to make the world a better place. And so it's funny the way you described essentially what I'm doing, because I do have a pretty large mission, but it starts with the listener, and it's one act of kindness at a time. So from a neurobiological standpoint, Rocky, if I were to hand you, of course, we're doing this over the internet, so let's use this in internet terms. If I was to Venmo you $1,000 right now, and you were to Venmo randomly one of your listeners $1,000, and I was hooking up brain scans to see what happened in my brain and what happened in your brain, the same parts of our brains are lighting up. This particular part, this one of these ancient structures in the brain, the mesolimbic pathway, which is essentially the reward center of our brain. This is lighting up whether we're helping others or whether we're receiving assistance. So to kind of dovetail back to my statements about social media is that social media is one of the things, not the only thing, but it's certainly something that has us focus on the promotion of ourself and the promotion of stuff and the promotion of our own edification. Whereas the neuroscience tells us that if we're helping others, we receive the same amount of physiological good stuff from doing that. So part of my show's mission, it's called the #MyDailyHelping movement. And I encourage my listeners every single day to go commit an act of kindness, just one. If you want to do more, that's cool. And post it in your social media feeds using the #MyDailyHelping. And my hope and belief is that if we get people doing this increasingly, the more they're doing it, the more they're going to feel happy and fulfilled. My goal is to get 1 million people doing this every day. That's a whole lot of people helping others. And so it can be something small. It can be something as simple as letting a car get in who's making a left or right-hand turn out of Dunkin' Donuts in the morning and letting them in. It can be as simple as holding the door for somebody, even smiling at somebody. It doesn't always have to be. People think that this type of an act always has to be time-consuming or something that is involved in money. And it doesn't. Like, I will often buy groceries for somebody else. Like when I'm at the store, I'll buy the cart. If I have enough time, I'll buy the cart of groceries for somebody in front of me or the person behind me. And it's really funny to watch that happen, Rocky, because what people get freaked out because it's so contrary. Or I'll buy somebody's gas, at the gas station. People freak out. And they don't think you're on the level. And I've had people like literally start looking around for hidden cameras or something. But once they realize that no strings, and I don't even tell them, I don't tell them who I am. I don't tell them this is my show. I just pay it forward. And so when people do that and people realize you're really doing that, it is so cool to watch their whole body language and facial expression change. And that's through my show. That's what I'm trying to promote. And I'm very grateful for the platform. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to connect with people like yourself who are so committed to having people live fulfilled, enriched lives and share how they got there and their stories with others. So that's what we're doing on the Daily Helping.
And that's awesome. And we've had some other guests who've talked about as they go through the drive-through or the coffee line, buying the coffee for the person behind them or paying a toll or doing something like that. Now, you mentioned, though, that it lights up in the brain for both people. I was told, and maybe it's wrong, I thought that the giver lights up even more than the receiver. Is that true or no?
The most recent studies suggest that you can have equivalency in terms of neurobiological responses. Everything is relative, right? Like, I suppose if somebody gets $5 and then gives 100, like, that's different because we're applying force, we're applying scale to these things. But there is a lot of research that still says that if you're helping somebody else or if you're receiving that assistance, you're still going to have the same parts of your brain that light up. And the other piece of the giving is the non-neurobiological piece. And maybe this is why, to your point, is that we add as humans, like the pleasure centers that we have exist in the brains of other animals. But we have far more evolved brains where we're able to apply meaning to what we're doing. And it's certainly far more meaningful, research shows that, to give than receive as well. So probably what happens for the giver is that the giver is not only having the neurobiological benefits, and they're also having the implicit feelings and applying experiences of helping others. And then that translates to, I'm a good person. I'm setting a good example for my kid, these other things. So it's those other meanings that we apply to it that could promote extra feelings of goodness.
That, and we're probably not having that fearful thought at the moment, too, because we're doing something good. So it's kind of shutting down the fear and the negativity, and it's putting us into a positive mindset and continuing us down that journey.
Yes.
And you do much more than this. I know that you also have a nonprofit, and you're focusing in an interesting area because this is one that I struggle with. As a society, we tend to want to help the weakest, but we seem to ignore the middle, that if we focused a little bit more on the middle, they could do so much more. And can you share a little bit about your nonprofit and what you do and how you help push kids forward?
Yeah, I really appreciate you asking me that question. So our charity is called Every Kid Rocks, and the website's everykidrocks.org, and we're in the process of launching that. We're going to be live in October, and we've been working on this for 2 years. I'm so excited about this. I know we're short on time, but the extraordinarily abbreviated version of why I did this is my oldest son, who's 5, nearly died in utero at 31 weeks, and it was truly a miracle how we were able to find out what was going on with him. And though when he was born, he had all of these challenges, and we were able to get him the help that we needed at tremendous financial cost to ourselves at the time. We couldn't afford to get him the help that we needed, and we did it anyway and put ourselves into debt because any parent would do that for their kid. This was back in 2013. What ended up happening is because of the amazing teacher that he had, because of the support from the community, I have a perfectly functional, wonderful 5-year-old kid who is typical or above average in every way, for which I'm incredibly grateful. Although there are so many kids who, like my son, just needed a push to reach their true potential. The school systems are not designed, and I'm not attacking teachers or attacking schools. I mean, it's just simply there are only so many resources available in a school setting to help kids, right? Like the ones that get the attention are either the behavior problems or the severely disabled kids. And I wish that there were more services in place to help those kids. Like, we always need more. However, there's nobody in the space of helping the child that maybe just needs 5 sessions of speech therapy to get over that lisp or 10 sessions of physical therapy. There's nobody doing that. Well, now there is. So what Every Kid Rocks does is that we raise money and we give it directly to the schools. Schools apply to be a part of our program to where their students, the students who typically are the ones that are at risk for developing low self-esteem and depression, because they're the ones that are not behavior problems and they're the ones that just kind of get passed through and slip through the cracks. We're helping schools identify who those children are and utilize local providers within their own community to help those children. It's by far the most exciting and rewarding thing that I've ever done, and our goal is to help 10,000 children a year.
Another amazing thing that you're doing. I will tell you, because I've done a lot of coaching over the years through sports and through other school organizations, and I see today that there are a lot of kids who just need that small win. And every time I've seen a kid get that small win, it literally opens up their world. And it gives them the possibility that this is possible, that it kind of breaks their fear cycle. And unfortunately, in a lot of school systems, everyone is kind of jockeying for position and pushing each other down. And when you give those kids that little bit of opportunity, that little step forward, it can open up a tremendous world for them and the ability to truly shine. And when I do my coaching for sports and for other things, I'm not coaching the sport. I'm coaching to help them kind of overcome themselves and find the confidence to do bigger things and to actually see that they can do more than they think is possible. And I think that's a big part of it, is helping people with that possibility. And we actually share that. My son was born at 30 weeks. So we went through that whole process of month in the hospital and all those types of things. But we've always pushed him forward because that's just our mindset. It wasn't like, oh, you were born small, so now we have to be fearful. It was kind of funny because my wife tells a story. He was supposed to be born in October. And had he been born in October, he couldn't start school when he was 5. He would have had to wait another year, which would have ticked me off. But because he was born 2 months early, they let him into school early, even though he was behind. And now we're thankful at the other end of the thing, because I'm sitting here going, had he not been able to push forward, he'd be so far ahead of the curve now, it would be an issue. And I think that's a lot of things. Parents, just as much as our brain, we're looking for our kids to be secure instead of saying, you know what, let's push these kids forward. Let's let them have some hardships. Let's let them try new things. Let's propel them to go do great things instead of getting stuck in the cycle that we may have grown up in.
Amen. Absolutely.
So is there anything else that we should talk about today that we have not touched upon?
I think we touched on a lot of really cool topics. I appreciate that you allowed me to share a little bit about my charity. And I think that I would just leave people with really start walking down that journey, even if it's a slow journey of finding things that you're passionate about. And if you start doing that, the dots will connect for you in terms of how to turn that passion into something that brings you fulfillment, can help others, and potentially something that you could derive income from as well. I know this is a financial wellness show, and it's not always about finances. But it is, you know this as well as anybody, unless you have that satisfaction in your soul, unless you have that sense of purpose, all the money in the world isn't going to make you happy.
And that's literally what this show is about. You can have all the money in the world. Now what? It didn't make you happy in most cases unless you did all of the other things to find your fulfillment and to be happy. And I was going to ask you for an action step, but I think you've already provided us one, is to go and start exploring the things that you enjoy doing. And I think too many people, as we talked about before, it's you don't have to jump off the cliff and burn the boats and go do something. You can just do it a little bit at a time and try some different things out and see if they're enjoyable. And it won't really affect the rest of your life. And it's just taking those small steps. And over time, great things happen.
There you go. Absolutely.
So if people would like to learn more about you and find you, where can they connect and listen in and learn more?
Yeah, so kind of the mothership of everything that we're doing is at thedailyhelping.com. And the podcast is available in all of the usual places, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. We have our own app as well that's available in the Google Play Store and on iTunes. I would like to give something away to your audience if you'd allow that. I'd be happy to do that.
Absolutely.
As part of giving back, we have through the Daily Helping a coaching program called Personal Helping, which is very much founded in neuroscience, which focuses on habit formation as well as helping people find that fulfillment and take those steps. And we give some sessions away every month. So if you want to have an opportunity to get some of those sessions free from our team, you can go to thedailyhelping.com/contest and put in your information, and about 10 people win every month. Something we like to do. Other than that, you mentioned the charity. I just wanted to put that out there as well, that everykidrocks.org is the name of the organization, and that site will be live in October. And even if you don't want to help monetarily, we certainly know that there are ways that you can help Every Kid Rocks, such as volunteering and bringing your school or your kid's school to come to know about our charity so that we can help kids who might be your child's classmates.
I think that's a very important point. People think that helping means giving money, and that's not always the case. Help comes in a variety of different ways. It's just sharing the knowledge and letting others know and letting people know that there are services available for them and connecting them to those services. And that's a great thing to do.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. I love being here. Thanks so much.
Dr. Richard and I talked after the show, and the reality is there's no magic new answer to success and happiness. There is just showing up and doing the work. Fear prevents us from taking the first step. I know it's been true in my life. Also, being able to see that there is more than one path. Too often we create mindsets and lenses that prevent us from seeing the forest as we are stuck on the tree in front of us, blocking our path. So I encourage you to take the action step that Dr. Richard put out. Find and focus on the things that you're passionate about and enjoy in life. I know I'm always trying new things, and now I'm learning to say no to a lot more activities and obligations so I can say yes to the ones I really want to do. What are you chasing after? Why are you? And how did you pick it? Or did someone else do that for you? Sometimes we need to ask ourselves why, so that we don't end up looking back with regrets later in life. It's harder to keep wealth than it is to make it. Once you come up with a system to create wealth, you need to come up with a system to keep it. If you'd like a second opinion on your financial plans or are worried you're missing something, check out the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats at richardsoul.com/SWOT. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a few friends. It's a great way to say thank you to me. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals? Just email me, and we can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit. You can always get me at rocky@richardsoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped you. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.